Nicole Kidman had done hundreds of interviews in her life. She knew the choreography by heart, the lights, the chair, the glass of water, the small talk, the same 5 questions asked by different faces, but that night, something was different. She felt it before hair and makeup, before the producer's handshake, before the red light over the camera blinked awake. It was in the way her chest felt strangely light. In the way her heart wasn't racing. In the simple fact that, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't preparing answers in advance. She had decided, quiet and alone, that this interview wouldn't be like the others. The host didn't know that. The crew didn't know that. The world certainly didn't know that, but Nicole did. She walked onto the set in a simple, elegant dress, no dramatic train, no shimmering armor of sequins. She smiled, said hello to the staff, and took her seat in the chair where, unbeknownst to them, she was about to open a door she'd kept shut for years. Not about her career, not about her awards, not even about her children, about Keith, and about a part of their story that had never been told, not in interviews, not in profiles, not in glowing magazine features. A hidden chapter she had carried like a folded letter in the lining of her heart. The host started as they always do. Warm, disarming, polished. Nicole, it's such an honor to have you here. She smiled. Polite. Thank you. It's good to be here. They eased in with safe territory. Her latest project. The challenges of playing complex women. The balance between work and family. She answered instinctively, each response precise, thoughtful, almost effortless. Then the host shifted. I feel like people have watched you for so long, he said, as an actress, a mother, a public figure. But they're still fascinated by the private side of your life, especially your relationship with Keith. You two are often seen as one of the rare lasting love stories in this industry. Nicole's fingers rested lightly against the arm of the chair. Are we? She asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. I think so, he said. From the outside, at least. Nicole smiled again, but this time it was different. Softer. Less public. And from the inside, she whispered, almost to herself. The host tilted his head. Something in her tone made him realize there was more to this moment than the standard how we make it work answer he was expecting. Nicole exhaled slowly. I've talked a lot about my marriage, she said. But I don't think I've ever talked about this part of it. Her eyes shifted away from the camera, settling on some invisible point in the distance. I think, as she continued, I'd like to share a chapter I've never told before. The host went silent. The studio, for a beat, seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't scandal in her voice. It wasn't drama. It was something far rarer in Hollywood. Unguarded sincerity. It's not a secret in the tragic sense, she added quickly. No affairs, no scandals, no betrayals. She gave a small, ironic smile. Sorry to disappoint. The host laughed softly, relieved. It's a different kind of secret, Nicole said. One that existed inside me. One I kept from the world. And from myself, for a while. She smoothed an invisible crease on her dress. It starts, as she said, in Nashville. Before the world ever saw us as Nicole and Keith, just 2 people trying to figure out if we belonged in each other's lives. She took them back, years earlier, to a humid summer evening that smelled of rain and guitar strings. Nashville wasn't like Los Angeles. That's what struck her first. There was no constant rush of cameras, no invisible hum of people hustling to be seen. Nashville felt like a city that listened instead of watched. She had flown in quietly, no red carpet, no press release. Just a woman with a suitcase and a heart that wasn't quite ready to admit how much it wanted to be there. Keith met her at the small airport, cap pulled low, denim jacket, that familiar combination of rock star and boy next door. He hugged her tightly, laughing into her hair. You made it, he said. I made it, as she answered, trying not to sound as relieved as she felt. They drove in comfortable silence. Somewhere between the exit ramp and the city lights, he reached over and linked their fingers together on the console. This place is different, he said. You'll see. He took her to a small house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't his main home. It wasn't public. It was the first place he'd bought before everything. Before fame, before stadium tours, before awards. A house full of worn wood, old instruments, coffee rings on the table, and quiet. Why here? As she asked, stepping inside. Because, he said simply, this is where I remember who I am when no one's looking. Nicole walked slowly through the living room, tracing the spines of books on a shelf, looking at old photos of a younger Keith performing in small bars. She felt strangely exposed, as if stepping into someone's diary. He showed her the backyard, a patch of grass, a single tree, an old swing that creaked when the wind moved through it. Or it's not much, he said, or it's honest, as she replied. They spent the evening talking on the back steps, the kind of talk that happens when time doesn't feel real. Childhood stories. Bruised dreams. The strange loneliness of being adored by millions and misunderstood by yourself. At one point, he asked her a question that would linger in her memory for years. What makes you feel safest? He said. Nicole hesitated, watching the fireflies blink in the yard. A silence, as she answered eventually. The kind where I don't have to perform anything. Not happiness. Not sadness. Just be. Keith nodded thoughtfully. I hope you can have that with me, he said. She wanted to say she already did. But part of her, a part shaped by years of surviving with armor, held back instead. She smiled. And maybe one day, as she replied. Back in the studio, Nicole's voice grew more reflective. That little house, as she said, it became ours. Not officially, not on paper. On paper, it was just another property. But emotionally, it was the one place where our lives weren't curated. The host listened, fully immersed, and no stylists, as she continued. No assistants. No journalists waiting outside. Just us. Sometimes for days. Sometimes only for a night between schedules. She paused, and it's where I realized something I didn't know how to admit out loud. The host leaned in slightly. What was that? He asked. Nicole looked down, a faint smile tugging at her lips, touched with sadness. That I was falling in love with a version of my life I didn't trust myself to keep. The hidden chapter, she explained, wasn't a single event. It was a season. A stretch of years woven between public milestones and private hesitation. People saw photographs, premieres, award shows, glamorous snapshots of a love story written for magazines. They didn't see Nashville mornings. They didn't see her wearing his shirt in the kitchen, barefoot, making coffee while he hummed half-formed songs under his breath. They didn't see nights when they sat on the floor with takeout containers, laughing over absolutely nothing. They certainly didn't see the arguments, quiet, tired conflicts, not dramatic enough for headlines, but strong enough to make them question how two people so in love could still feel oceans apart sometimes. This is the part of our story I never shared, and Nicole said. Not because I was hiding something from the public, but because I didn't understand it myself. She folded her hands together in her lap. Keith and I had this place where we were real. Completely real. And yet, for a long time, I only let myself live there halfway. There was one night in that Nashville house that stayed lodged in her memory like a single note held too long. The storm rolled in without warning, thunder that rattled the windows, rain hitting the roof in wild patterns. The power went out just after midnight, plunging the house into darkness. Keith lit a few candles and placed them on the coffee table. Their shadows flickered against the walls. He grinned at her. Old-fashioned night in. She tried to smile back, but there was something restless inside her. A feeling she couldn't name. He noticed. Are you okay? He asked. Fine, she said automatically. Keith watched her for a moment. He knew that tone. The smooth, polished I'm fine, that belonged to Nicole Kidman, the public figure, not Nic, the woman who sat on his floor eating noodles with him at 2 a.m. He sat beside her on the couch and didn't speak. The storm rumbled outside. Inside, the room felt like a small island of light. Do you trust this? He asked quietly. She looked at him, puzzled. What do you mean? This, he said, gesturing vaguely between them. Us. Here. Without the noise. Without the cameras. Do you trust it? She stared at the candle flame, the way it seemed fragile and stubborn all at once. I don't know. She admitted. It was the truest thing she had said all night. He nodded slowly. That's honest, he said. I'll take honest over easy. She swallowed. What if I break it? She whispered. What if I break us? He smiled at her with a tenderness that almost hurt to look at. Then we fix it, he said. Or we try. Or we break together and see what's left. But I don't want you living like this is something you're on probation for. She gave a short, shaky laugh. Sometimes, she said. I feel like I'm just waiting for you to realize I'm more complicated than you signed up for. He leaned back, resting his arm along the back of the couch. And I see, he said softly. I knew you were complicated before I ever kissed you. I liked you anyway. Lightning flashed through the windows, lighting up his face. For a second, he looked like two versions of himself overlapped, the man on stage and the man in the dark with her. And what about you? She asked. What don't I know? He hesitated, then looked at her with a seriousness she rarely saw. You don't know, he said slowly, that there were years before you when I didn't think I deserved this either. Not you. Not us. Not any of it. Her breath caught. I know your story, she said. The public one. The interviews. The recovery. The songs. He shook his head. There are things I carry that don't fit into songs, he said. But that's not what scares me. Then what scares you? She asked. His answer was simple. You, he said. Losing you. Losing whatever this is because you can't believe I'm here for the long haul. The storm roared outside. Inside, silence. She didn't know how to answer. Not because she didn't care, but because nobody had ever told her that her fear was someone else's fear too. So she did the thing she knew best. She changed the subject. She deflected. She kissed him. She folded the moment into physical closeness and hoped it would quiet the questions. It didn't, not really. Back in the studio, Nicole looked at the floor for a long beat. That storm, as she said quietly, it was the first time I understood that my caution wasn't neutral. It cost him something. The host nodded slowly. But I didn't fix it overnight, as she added. I wish I could say I woke up, changed my patterns, opened my heart completely and never looked back. Life is not a 2-hour movie. Healing is slow. Confusing. Sometimes you think you've arrived somewhere, but really you're just at the next door. So what was this hidden chapter, to you? The host asked gently, her eyes lifted, calm and clear. It was the period of our marriage, as she said, where we were deeply in love, but not fully seen. Not yet. Not by each other. Not in the way we needed to be. She paused. People think love solves everything. It doesn't. Love is the invitation. The work is in how brave you're willing to be once you're inside. There was another moment she shared, one she had never spoken about in public, one that lived in the quiet between tours and shooting schedules. It wasn't a crisis. It wasn't a scandal. It was a choice. She had been offered a role, a massive one. Awards buzz. Critical prestige. A project that would require months away, emotionally and physically. The script was brilliant. The character was heavy, broken, haunted. I loved the role, as she told the host. I admired it. I understood it. But something in me hesitated. She brought the script home to Nashville. Sat at the kitchen table with it. Read it alone, highlighter in hand, notes in the margins. Keith walked in, caught the look on her face. A big one? He asked. Very. As she replied. He poured himself coffee, watching her quietly. You want it? He asked. Yes, she said. Then, after a pause, I think. He didn't push. He didn't say, you should do it, or we'll make it work. He just waited. What are you afraid of? He finally asked. That I'll disappear again, she said. He knew exactly what she meant. There had been roles before where she'd come back haunted. Roles that clung to her long after filming wrapped. Characters that gave her awards and stole her sleep. Do you trust yourself not to? He asked. She stared at the script. I don't know, she said. Then trust me, he replied. She looked up, surprised. He walked over, sat across from her, and placed his hand flat on the script. If you do this, he said, we'll build something around it. A kind of emotional landing strip. You won't come back into a void. You'll come back to us. I'll make sure there's enough light waiting for you when you're done walking through the dark. She blinked back sudden tears. And what if it still changes me? She whispered. Then we'll change together, he said. But I don't want you turning down life because you're scared of vanishing. You're allowed to live fully. Just don't do it alone. It was one of the most generous things anyone had ever said to her. And did you take the role? The host asked. Nicole smiled. I did, she said. And it did change me. I did disappear a little. But for the first time in my life, I had someone who came looking for me. She glanced down, the memory softening her expression. He would send me little videos from home, she said. The dog running around. The kids laughing. The sky over Nashville. Not big declarations. Just reminders, there is a world to come back to. And when shooting finally ended, she flew straight to that little house. When I walked in, she said, there were candles lit. Music playing low. He had cooked. Badly, she added with a smile. We ordered pizza in the end. The host laughed. But it didn't matter, she continued. Because I realized something. They say home is where the heart is, but they leave out the part where sometimes someone else holds your heart for you while you're not able to. She folded her hands. That's what he did for me. That's what that chapter was, underneath all my fear. A man who kept holding space for a version of me I hadn't grown into yet. The hidden chapter, Nicole explained, didn't end with some dramatic fight or a single breakthrough. It ended gradually, like the slow arrival of dawn. Tiny choices. Quiet words. Small new habits, reaching for his hand first. Telling the truth when I'm fine hovered on her tongue, letting him see her on bad days, not just glossy ones. It was like learning a new language, as she said. The language of being known. And when did you realize that chapter had ended? The host asked. Nicole thought for a long moment. You're on a Tuesday, she said at last. He smiled. A Tuesday? Yes, she replied. That's the point. There was nothing special about it. She described that ordinary day. She had woken up late. The kids were off doing their own things. The house was quiet. She wandered into the kitchen to find Keith barefoot, in an old t-shirt, making pancakes, and badly humming a song he hadn't finished writing. He turned, saw her, and his face lit up with a kind of smile that said, I'm glad you're here, without any words. She walked over, slipped her arms around him from behind, rested her cheek between his shoulder blades, and in that simple, unremarkable, entirely human moment, something inside her clicked into place. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, she said. Not just with him. With myself. She paused, and I realized the hidden chapter was over, not because we became perfect, but because we became honest. The host sat back, absorbing everything she had shared. So why tell it now? He asked. Why share this part of your story at 58? Nicole smiled, a quiet, luminous smile. Because, as she said, people see the photos and think, they must have figured it out from the start. And that's not true. We figured it out slowly. Clumsily. We made mistakes. We hurt each other without meaning to. But we kept choosing each other. She sighed gently, and because there are people watching who think they're too old to learn a new way of loving. Too old to open up. Too old to start again with the person they've been with for years. Her eyes found the camera, and for the first time that night, she looked directly into it as if speaking not to an audience, but to one person. You're not too old, as she said simply. If I can learn to open my heart at 58, so can you. The host's voice softened. And Keith? He asked. What does he say about all this? She laughed quietly. When I told him I wanted to talk about this on camera, she said, he just smiled and said, tell them the truth, and I see. It's the only thing that really lasts. Her expression grew tender, and then he kissed my forehead and said, just be kind to the girl you used to be. She was trying. The studio fell silent. No applause. No dramatic music. Just a stillness that felt like respect. Finally, the host found his voice. Do you feel, he asked, like you've closed that hidden chapter now? Nicole thought carefully. I don't think it's closed, she said. I think it's been integrated. It's part of our story now. Not something in the dark, but something we learned from. She smiled. I'm no longer afraid of that version of myself. I'm grateful for her. Because without her, I wouldn't understand how precious this ordinary happiness is. Ordinary happiness? He repeated. Yes, she said. The kind where you sit on the couch with someone and know you don't have to earn your place there every day. She folded her hands, signaling, gently, that she had reached the end of what she was ready to share. The world can have the red carpets, as she said. They can have the speeches, the roles, the dresses. But this part, this hidden chapter, that's ours. I'm just borrowing it for a moment to tell someone watching. Your love story doesn't have to make sense to anyone but the two of you. The host nodded slowly, visibly moved. And Nicole, he said softly, thank you for trusting us with that. She gave a small, sincere smile. Thank you, as she replied, for letting me finally say it out loud. The red light above the camera turned off. The interview was over, but somewhere in Nashville, in a quiet house with an old swing out back and a guitar resting against a wall, a man would watch the replay later that night. He would see his wife sitting under studio lights, talking about storms and silence on Tuesday mornings, and when she said, he tells me I came home, he would smile to himself and whisper to the empty room, you always were. And that, Nicole would later say to a close friend, was the real end of the hidden chapter, not the moment she spoke it into the world, but the moment she realized it had always been their story, whether anyone else knew it or not.